Uwaga! Materiał, którego właśnie słuchasz, ma charakter wyłącznie rozrywkowy i informacyjny. Nie stanowi porady medycznej, ani nie zachęca do stosowania jakichkolwiek substancji. Wszystkie działania podejmujesz na własną odpowiedzialność, a autorzy podcastu nie ponoszą odpowiedzialności za skutki wykorzystania tych treści w praktyce. Jeśli temat jest dla Ciebie rażący, śmiało wyłącz, ale subskrypcję możesz zostawić. Welcome in another English One podcast. Today we have a special guest, as always, Justin Jacoby. Hello.
Hey, buddy, what's going on?
How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. And thank you again for having me and making the time. I know it's late over there in Poland.
Yeah, it's not that late, but it's for me it's definitely late, especially that
Yeah,
I
it's
just
a late
finished my
work day.
workout.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
late work.
yeah. Man, today we're gonna talk about your approach to the off season for most of the time, but I wanted to create some sort of the scenario of an athlete, just because I think that this style of podcasting people is just more suitable for the audience to understand certain maybe like a certain cases. I don't know how to say it in better words, just because
Okay.
it is too wide of a subject to talk about the girls, the light weights, the middle weights, the heavyweights, super heavyweights guys in once, just because those guys are actually just the different animals. So this is
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. So let's say that I am your new client, and for some reason I just finished the contest prep. My
Okay.
blood works are perfect.
Okay.
I am lean. I am ready to go. And basically, I just I never have a coach before. Let's say it like that,
Okay.
just to not
Sure.
bring the the why you're leaving your coach
Yeah. Yeah. No,
stuff
that's
out
okay.
of the yeah. So let's say that I am a new client and we wanted to jump over the weight class. So let's say I am a heavyweight and I wanted to be a super heavyweight guy. So for example, I've weighed in on a stage 102 kilograms, so it's to 28, something like that.
225 is heavyweights. That's the cap of
Yeah.
heavyweights for
So
us
so two so
pounds.
225. So yeah. So let's
Yep.
say I was up on
Right
the
there.
limits. I
Yep.
stepped on a stage on a max out my weight class, and we wanted to
Okay.
jump over the next weight class. So how do you set up the or no? Let's start like that. What do you want from me at the beginning of our cooperation together?
So, like you mentioned right off the bat, that you said that you had blood work and it was flawless. It was it was perfectly fine, no issues. So we shouldn't have any ability. We should have the ability to just jump right in, right? We don't have to fix anything or anything like that. Especially if you're coming off of the stage and you're in your reverse diet. This is a time frame that I love, and even when I do have people maybe coming to me as a new client, this is a time frame I really like to get involved as quickly as I possibly can, the day after the show, even like I'm ready to go. I want to make sure that we can capitalize and make and take advantage of the insulin sensitivity, just the overall sensitivity you are to literally every variable at this point, right? So when you get off a stage, your physique is rather depleted and all of these things, right? Again, like we're very low body fat. So simply getting the calories to more of a maintenance level and bringing the body out of a deficit and letting that ride for a while. It's not something where you have to be adding food every single week. If you can pretty much guesstimate approximately with, the good feedback you've gotten from the athlete, as well as just some, markers that you have. And again, there is going to be some guesstimating going on, but if we can nail like a maintenance level of calories right off the bat, that would be the first thing that we would do. We would probably run that for the first 4 weeks or so out of the reverse diet. You're going to see the scale coming up. You're going to see fullness coming back. You're going to see energy levels coming back. Of course, a little bit of body fat's going to come back on. That's normal. That's not a problem. But the performance in the gym is also going to then drive up with the fact that energy levels are coming up. Sleep will likely get better, as we know that towards the end of a contest prep, sleep tends to usually take a dive. So all of these ability, now we have a much higher recovery capability because our sleep is better. We have a higher recovery capability because our food is higher. One of the first things after a contest is I make a pretty drastic reduction in PED usage. Now, I understand we are making in this hypothetical scenario. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you just because you told me that you wanted to set up my maintenance calories, and then
Yep,
you says that I'm probably gonna gain some fat. How is that even possible?
a little bit. Because we're pulling out of a deficit to more of like a maintenance level. So when I say maintenance, I'm saying we're the maintenance, because technically anything can be considered maintenance, right? So like more of a, I would say maybe if we were in a significant deficit at the end of a contest prep, right? Well, bridging that gap to be more of like I'm maintenance is maybe kind of not the right word, but I'm going to try and bring you into a calorie limit that is going to
Homeostasis,
be,
yes, yeah, like
what's
like a
that?
homeostasis, like accumulation
Yeah,
with
more like
homeostasis.
right. It's I'm trying to bring the food levels back into an area where I can have the body kind of reach homeostasis, right? I think that's maybe a better way to describe that. But because of the fact that over the course of maybe the first 4 to 5 weeks of the reverse diet, we are eating more food. We're no longer in a deficit. Of course, like the body will start to replenish a little bit of fat storages. That's normal, right? Because we're in such an extreme state of such low body fat, right? We have to remember that like we're not the normal people, right? Like bodybuilding is very abnormal. It's super extreme. So we're actually trying to get almost your body into, like I said, like you mentioned, more of a homeostasis state by bringing some calories in, right? So we add a little bit more dietary fat in. Again, that can help with cognitive function. Again, usually people experience prep brain at the end. Okay, well, let's get some fats in there for more acetylcholine levels to come up. And then obviously carbohydrates. Usually protein levels stay relatively the same from the end of a prep to kind of the beginning of, the reverse diet. I'm not a super high protein guy. 1.25 grams of protein per pound of lean body mass. That's kind of a sweet spot. I've never done the really high protein before. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to stop you just because I'm going to ask you about all the macronutrients
Okay.
right after we talk about the training, just because I know that you're huge on training, and the training is the one of the most important, or even the most important thing for you in this in all of the periods, actually, to be honest.
Correct.
So let's talk training first, but first of all, I just wanted to mention that I might sometimes stop you and catch
Okay.
you uh, like I don't want to be rude and I don't want to sound
No,
rude,
no, no.
but
It's okay.
sometimes I wanted to just clarify just because if someone says maintenance, you know that's gonna be a YouTube police that's gonna catch
Yeah,
your
and it's a
words.
different
Yeah,
maintenance
yeah,
is an ever fluctuating number. I get that
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
there's so okay, all right. So just for hypothetical purposes, right? So you were a 225-pound bodybuilder on stage, maxed out of the heavies, right? Well, maybe the goal is to find maintenance level calories for where to bring your body weight up to 235.
Yeah.
That's really how you would factor in maintenance, right? It's like, well, what is my
Yeah.
maintenance calories to maintain this body weight and this composition? That would actually be the way to explain that. So again, I use a simplistic term, whereas
Yeah.
homeostasis was probably the better term. But again, I understand. Yeah, YouTube
Yeah,
police, you got
I
to
just,
be
I just, you
very
know how it
direct.
works in the fitness industry. There's only maintenance, deficit, or like a surplus. So if someone
Right.
says
Yeah. And
maintenance,
I use the same
it's
way.
zero, it's like zero. So yeah. So let's
Right.
just let's talk about the training, just because this is
Okay.
probably the biggest topic for us today. So,
Okay.
how do you set up the training during the off season? Are you focusing more on the volume or at the intensity, or you're doing something like I don't know, like a cycling periods of higher intensity than lower intensity, or something like that?
Well, so the way that I use I refer to training as like three main variables. You have frequency, the number of times you hit a body part per week. You have volume, which to me is the number of total working sets to failure per workout, right? So for the whole workout. And then we have intensity or load, which I come from the world where intensity is referred to as the percentage of one rep max. So high intensity to me means okay, this person trains with relatively high loads to achieve muscular failure. So they're likely going to be lifting in slightly lower rep ranges. Like obviously, right? We can't lift 95% of our one rep max for 20 reps. That doesn't really work. And so I'm a low volume, high intensity trainer, and I prefer a solid amount of frequency. If I had, so currently, I'll use myself as an example because I'm in an off season. Well, I'm going to be finishing a rebound here actually shortly because I did a little bit of a diet after my knee surgery. But I use myself as a pretty good guinea pig, so I can use myself as an example. I'm doing an upper lower split, so like old school, kind of like the Dante Trudel method of, DC training, Mike Mentzer's heavy duty training. I like multi muscle group exercise or workouts, excuse me. So like I like to hit multiple muscle groups in the same workout. I'm not a bro split guy. You'll really never see a program from me where it's chest on Monday, back on Tuesday, shoulders on Wednesday. That's just not how I am. That's a very low frequency approach, and I think frequency is actually really important. Now, if I have to choose, like I said, you have those three variables: load, frequency, and volume. You can use two. You can't program all three into the plan at the same time. There's no way to recover from that, in my opinion. So you
Unless
can't
you're
have
Remy Coleman.
okay. I mean, yeah, there's genetic anomalies, but I'm speaking to the
Yeah,
masses. You know what I mean? I try not to speak in absolutes, but I'm going to speak toward the majority of us that would fall under that umbrella, as opposed to the anomalies.
of
Um,
course.
so I personally like a lower volume approach. Now, I will say, I think volume is something that is ever changing because at the beginning of a program, let's say I run a 16-week mesocycle for myself, or even for my training program, my training partner, Mike Condell, 212 Pro. We will start with the lowest amount of volume possible that can stimulate and allow us to yield new hypertrophy, right? So we're building new tissue. But over the course of that 16 weeks, maybe every 3 to 4 weeks, we slightly increase our volume as long as our recovery capabilities are maintaining. Now, if I'm wrecked and he's wrecked and it's like, dude, I can't add any more volume, then we may have reached our maximum recoverable volume relatively early in the program. That's fine. As long as we're still recovering, and I still believe in logbooking. So I am still a guy that likes to chart my performance. If I can see my performance going up throughout the course of a mesocycle, then I know for a fact that I'm yielding new progress. I'm building denser tissue. I'm creating new muscle. Like I'm volumizing tissue, whatever vernacular and verbiage you want to use, right? YouTube, please. Good things are happening. The physique is changing. The physique is growing. We're doing what we need to do in the off season. That to me is how you would program. Now, there's lots of different ways. A lot of people like volume. I'm just not a huge volume guy. Some people don't want to take the risk because they think lifting with higher loads is just automatically more dangerous. Well, it depends. The next thing that you would also have to factor in is like rep execution and intensity. Now, to me, or effort, excuse me, let me use that word, effort and execution. So effort levels. Are you truly taking your sets to failure, or are you stopping when the set gets hard?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, when you try and implement an RAR scale, they don't know what 1 or 2 RAR is because they don't know what 0 RAR is.
Yeah.
So the only way that you can use an RAR scale, in my opinion, is if you truly know how to train all the way to muscular failure. Like truthfully, gun to your head, if you could not get another rep, but you at least try and you failed, okay, that's 0 RAR. You have achieved failure. Now, just like the way Tom Platz likes to say in his videos, like, okay, you've achieved failure. That's the good thing. That's what you're trying to do. So to me, I personally would rather just keep my volume on the lower side because I don't like having to pull back. I like to be able to take my working sets to failure. That's what's fun for me. It's challenging. But maybe I'm different. Maybe I'm weird. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. But what I have done with my own physique, as well as what I've done with all of the athletes that I've worked with, is like we've done nothing but get extremely strong in the off season with still really high quality rep execution. So again, every pro that has ever existed has preached the same thing, right? You lift a heavy load as many times as you can with good form. It's very simple. But in practice, it kind of falls apart, right? Because people put it on paper and they're like, well, that doesn't work on paper. And it's like, you have to do it in practice. That's right. It works in practice. So from a training perspective, in a nutshell, that would be exactly how I would program for everyone. And then even if volume didn't scale all that much throughout the mesocycle, as long as performance is improving, then you can definitely still see a ton of progress, a lot of progress. And the way that I gauge performance is load lifted, reps completed, mind muscle connection, and the ability to get a really good pump. So there's still 4 really good ways. Now, the last 2, mind muscle connection and pump, are less quantifiable than load and reps completed, but they're still very important, right? Because nobody cares how much you bench press when you're on stage. You know, nobody really cared that Ronnie could squat 800 pounds for 3 reps or 2 reps or however many it was. What they cared about was that he had the biggest legs in the IFBB, you know, and he just developed them doing it that way. So to me, it's about that's why those 2 are still on there and are still very important. Mind muscle connection and the ability to get really good pumps. If we're training hard, we're really loading properly. Where, you know, if I'm doing a single arm lat pull down and I'm really pushing the load, I'm pushing as many reps as I can, and my rep execution is as perfect as it can be, then there's no way that I can't have a crazy pump in my lat by the time that I'm done. And as well, as long as, again, if I can really improve my mind muscle connection over time, which that's a skill, right? So that's training is a skill. We develop that over time. Your mind muscle connection will get better as you train more, the longer you have been doing something, right? I don't know about you, but like when I first started bodybuilding, I just moved weight around. I wasn't a really good trainer. I knew how to train really hard, but I didn't know how to do anything right. I just knew work ethic. And then once I learned how to actually, like, okay, here's how I contract a lat. Here's how I contract my chest when I'm doing a chest press. Here's how I actually get my quads to fire when I'm doing a barbell back squat, as opposed to just sitting into my hips and using my ass the whole time, right? So those 4 areas are still worth logging in my logbook to be able to gauge and track my performance.
Okay. Okay. So I think that that explains pretty much everything just because you are just a basic progressive overload dude. So this is the
Progressive
old
overload.
school. Yeah. Okay.
And the reason why is because we have there actually has been studies, and we do have some legitimate science and literature that does prove that progressive overload is arguably the most effective way to build lean muscle mass. Like we've done those studies. Like that is out there, as opposed to volume training or BFR training or any of these other different, you know, types of, you know, training methods. I love progressive overload because it's challenging. And quite frankly, I like doing challenging things. And I also think that when you look at the biggest and best bodybuilders in the world, right? You look at open pro bodybuilders, for the most part, they're going to be some of the strongest guys in your gym. Obviously, you know what I mean? You don't get to be 260 pounds ripped shredded on stage by lifting 25-pound dumbbells. You know, like at
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
point at some point you do have to get strong. Um, Jordan Peters is somebody who I've, you know, looked up to a lot, and I think that he's much more articulate in the way that he explains things than me, perhaps. But that's really where I learned a lot of my training style. I learned very early on from, you know, Jordan Peters' app, Dusty Hanshaw's. I actually hired him to do my training for almost 2 years, as well as watching his YouTube videos, reading anything I could get my hands on from Dante Trudell, watching a ton of I watched all of the Blood and Guts videos from Dorian Yates. And then obviously I really enjoyed, you know, reading about Mike Mentzer's stuff and watching his training videos of when he was just working as a trainer and he was putting other people through workouts. That stuff was just, it just resonated with me at a very young age. And I'm still young. I'm only 31, but I started bodybuilding at 20 and I did my first show at 21. So I left the competitive, you know, collegiate football world where I played sports my whole life and transformed my training from being more powerlifting and functional strength type of stuff. That was my baseline, bench, squat, deadlift, etc., into bodybuilding. And it was a relatively seamless transition because the mindset with powerlifting and that type of training for sports is really, the programs are terrible. Like the programming was terrible in high school and college for football, but man, we got really, really strong and everybody saw a ton of progress. And I think what it was is it taught us how to work really hard.
Yeah.
So then you couple that that work ethic of, because sometimes, dude, like when you're young, you kind of got to bash your head against the wall and just like do hard shit for a while before you get too caught up in like the nuance nowadays with everything having to be so scientific and your elbow having to be just perfectly right. And it's like, hey man, just like get really strong at this for a little while, and like I promise that your physique's going to respond. So
Yeah, the simpler the better. I think this is like the simplest approach. But what do you think about, because this is a topic that's very often is considered for mostly for the guys who have struggled with their waist or like abdominal overgrowth and stuff like that. Just
yeah,
because lifting heavy obviously is gonna incorporate more of your core muscles. And
yep,
in this case, how do you set up the training for guys like, for example, me, just because my waist is basically shit? And you mentioned Jordan Peters, and Jordan actually says that he actually probably destroys his waist because of the overuse of the insulin and overeating, but also lifting very, very heavy.
of course. I do. So I want to agree with what he said, because I do think that a lot of it is eating based. I think a lot of it is also likely people that need to maybe look into actually like cleaning up their microbiome and maybe doing a GI map, a gut protocol, et cetera. Because I've actually seen a lot of people fix their waist after years of it being not great because of the fact that they actually looked into the internals. But the training is definitely important. So I don't want to dismiss that. And I want to answer that question for somebody who maybe already has something pre-existing, right? Because I've had athletes come to me that have something pre-existing. We're not going to do nearly the same type of, spine supported loading, right? So like we're not putting a barbell on their back and squatting 5, 6 plates, 7 plates. We're not deadlifting, picking a barbell up from the ground. That's just not something that we're going to do. For most of those guys that you would reference that maybe have seen some abdominal overgrowth, the waist has thickened a bit,
Yeah.
they're also really densely muscled guys, right? Because you don't get to that point without also likely putting on a good bit of muscle in the same process, right? It's not like the only thing that grew was the waist, everything around it grew as well. So there are going to be certain things that we want to avoid. Now, let's say that you're doing a lot of overhead pressing, maybe even free weight overhead pressing, whether it's dumbbells or a barbell. Anytime that you press something over your head, what do you think is being worked as well as your shoulders?
Yeah.
Your midsection. Because what at the end of the day is supporting that weight that's over your head? Well, your core is actually having to engage a lot to be able to stabilize with that weight over your head. Just the same way that it would if you have a barbell on your back or if you're lifting a barbell off the ground. So of course they're going to have to do a little bit more maybe machine-based work, more isolation type movements. But the same principles I still think should apply, because you can still train progressive overload. You can still train with a relatively high level of intensity. We might lower the weight slightly and use a bit more of a cadence, slightly different tempo, and shoot for a slightly higher rep range, maybe a little bit more blood volume, as opposed to sets of 6 to 9 where the load is just super heavy. Now, especially for lower body stuff, even if we did something like an RDL, that would be done usually on a Smith machine or a belt squat, something where the stabilization muscles can be taken out a little bit. And then we're going to use cadence. So we're going to slow down tempo, maybe some pause reps in the fully lengthened position. And then we're going to definitely drive our rep numbers up a bit. So what might usually be a 6 to 9 rep range for somebody like me or somebody who's, really needs to muscle up might go to a 12 to 15 repetition range. Because at that point, if they have the tissue, then we can refine and improve the quality of the tissue through repetition.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
it's going to be, and a lot of that is going to be them communicating. We're going to have to communicate together and then be able to fine tune the program. Because if they're doing a movement and they're like, hey man, I feel a lot of this in like my obliques and my core, my midsection, like I'm engaging that a lot when I'm doing this exercise, then especially if it's somebody who doesn't have a great waist, well, then I'm gonna say like, okay, well, let's find another movement that's similar to this that you have access to, that we can target the same muscle group without having there be as much maybe core involvement or core, like the recruitment of the core muscles. That's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that before, and it is a challenging one. That is a very challenging part about bodybuilding. And
Yeah.
usually my answer to that would be like, hey, want to avoid the waist getting out of control in the first place. But I do think a lot of it, David, is it's it's definitely a lot of eating. I don't want to blame insulin because insulin's a great hormone. Like it's like, and everybody makes insulin anyway.
Yeah.
But I think the eating and the training.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I am asking about this just because I've spoke with a lot of coaches, and there's actually a different answers from time to time because
Mhm.
some things that using belts are actually preventing from waist overgrowth. Some says that it's totally opposite, just because you are bracing over the belt, so you're probably going to engage your core a little bit more. Some
It could
says
be.
that working your abs are actually not the great idea, just because you're never gonna work only on your like a front part of your abs.
Correct.
Your obliques also gonna be engaging. Some says
Yep.
that working your waist as much as you can is the preventive way or of. So you have like a multiple different answers from multiple very good and well-known coaches. So this is like a topic that's never probably gonna be answered once for a while for a good, just because everyone says different. And there are guys who are lifting very heavy who has like a teeny tiny
Oh,
waist, and there are guys who are not actually that like super strong
super
guys,
strong.
and
Yeah.
their waists are shit.
Yeah.
So you're never gonna probably the only answer is genes.
Yeah, yeah, well, I think the biggest answer to that question, like you just said, I think a lot of it is genetic. If you
Yeah.
have a predisposition to have growth in that area, which you won't know until you really push the envelope, right? Then you'll know what your like what your genetic outmake is going to be. I will say there's two things that we didn't mention that I do want to mention is I think the way that they go about setting up their diet, and as opposed to 5 to 6 meals that are really big and they're eating a lot and they're forcing it down, and which is then really making their stomach, because the stomach as an organ is very malleable,
Yeah.
it stretches.
Stretchy. Yeah.
Yep. So that's stretching it. I would say, well, why don't we just do more like maybe 8 meals a day that are noticeably smaller? Yes, you're going to have to be very much on time with your food, and it's going to have to be very you're going to have to be really smart with your meal timing. But this is pro bodybuilding that we're talking about at this point. Like it's like you do whatever you have to. The other thing I think is I believe that training your transverse abdominals, which we do through vacuums, is really important. If we want to be able to bring, if we have the turtle shell abs and we want to be able to bring those in, the transverse abdominals is what's going to pull the abdominal wall more into the spine. So those are two things that I think get vastly overlooked, that can really be helpful. I actually like using waist trainers during cardio as a means to, unlike a weight belt, a waist trainer can just allow the athlete to know that they need to keep their midsection in. I think that's another thing that guys in the 90s and 2000s and even beyond that did noticeably better. They always were tight, right? They always walked around with their midsection tight. We see a lot of guys now that in the off season or when they're in the gym training, they got their baggy t-shirt on, but you can see the belly is out, and they're just
Yeah.
because they're just too relaxed. And I think that eventually that will become kind of the norm, and then it's harder for them to pull it back in. So there's a lot of different ways, and like you said, man, there's no one answer to this, because what works for you to maybe bring your waist in and maybe fix your waist issues could make the next guy's worse, and what he does to fix his could make yours worse. So I think the way that you answered that is probably the best way to go about it, because there's not one answer to that question.
Yeah, of course. Of course. So, okay, we probably talked about the training enough.
Okay.
We are over with question number one. There's 16 questions left. So, so off-season diet. I'm gonna basically ask you, do you like your guys stays very, very lean during the off-season, or do you prefer to do something like a full-blown out, like a mass mode? Remember that we are talking about me, and I am wanted to
Okay.
shoot over the weight class. So I
Okay.
have to build a shit ton of muscle, and we have like probably 1.5 year for
Okay.
doing that. So have that
So
in mind and consider that.
with that being said, and if this in this scenario, I'm getting them like right at the finish of a contest, so they're like really lean and everything to start with. Um, I like to keep in like the reverse diet, which transitions into the beginning of the first off season push. I want to keep them as lean as I can for as long as I can, and that's while slowly bringing calories up. So, from a composition standpoint, I want to keep composition in a really good spot, but I want to slowly be able to add a couple hundred calories every couple weeks so that for me, a reverse diet is usually about 12 weeks when executed properly. So, over the course of the 12 weeks, if I'm adding a couple hundred calories every couple of weeks, well, that would be 6 times that I may be adding calories. If I do 2 to 300 calories 6 times, that's another 1,200 to 1,800 calories over approximately whatever I started their, reverse diet at, which is always usually a little bit higher than what they were at the at the depths of the prep when their food was at the lowest, of course. But I'm doing this because I'm trying to create a threshold for metabolic function as well as for their body to respond the best to the food. So this not only would set us up for the next time that somebody preps to be able to likely prep on more food and to likely not have to drop their food quite as low, and for them to also reach the same composition they just reached in the previous contest slightly easier and slightly earlier, because I think conditioning is a threshold. Now I'm going to tie this into the off season here because I personally think that the human body grows muscle noticeably better when it's leaner than when you hit a certain saturation point of body fat. So I've always believed in this, and I've seen it enough times in practice, that body fat levels kind of hit a certain threshold. And when you're full, right, gas tank's full, we got to come back down a little bit. Because at this point, it's like I'm likely not going to be gaining all that much more muscle at that point. Glycogen storages are fully saturated. Liver glycogen storages are fully saturated. Blood glucose levels are slowly creeping up. And so we're losing a little bit of insulin sensitivity. Regardless of PED usage at that point, the body's going to likely start, because we're in a surplus, start slowly accumulating body fat a little bit faster. So in an effort to not just put on a bunch of body fat, that would be where I would say, okay, let's keep composition here for as long as possible and still gauge our performance in the gym. If performance in the gym is improving and the scale weight is slowly coming up, as well as the visual is improving and we're seeing things expanding, then we're doing what we need to do. Now, I will say this, and this is something that's important. You can only speed up the rate at which the human body grows muscle to a certain extent. And this is a genetic thing. So Nick Walker puts on muscle as fast as anybody. But there's going to be a lot of guys, even in the pro leagues, that can't keep up with him as far as how fast that guy can put on muscle. And I'm just using an extreme example, of course, right?
Yeah.
So Samson Dauda, another good example. Any of these guys who have put on 10, like 50, 75 pounds in 8 to 10 years, they clearly grow muscle at a pretty exuberant rate. So once we get to that certain point in the off season and we've been able to drive food up, performance is in a good spot, but we're just getting to that point where the composition is starting to kind of fade a little bit, then I would say, okay, let's drop some PEDs down. Let's drop some food down. Let's introduce a little bit of cardio. Let's do our first mini diet of the off season, maybe 8 to 10 weeks. Faster is better, the sooner, because we're not in a state where we're worried about losing muscle at this point, right? We're fully blown. It's like we've reached the maximum at that point in the off season, biggest likely you've ever been. Now it's okay. Let's drive it back down. Let's lose a little bit of body fat. Maybe let's use this time to clean out some receptors and reset, take some time off the drugs for a little bit, do some blood work, make sure things on the internal are in a good spot. Then once we have the composition back into a little bit better place, we're a little bit leaner, then we can start, and the blood work's good and all that stuff, right? I do want to make sure we keep that in mind because that stuff is important. Then we go right back up. We start pushing again. So I usually do phases of about 20 weeks where I'll be like, okay, this is off season phase 1. We're going to do this for 20 weeks. We have, our estimated cycle that we're going to run. And now I don't pre-write cycles for people. It's based on what's needed. If someone's growing on 500 mgs of test and 300 mgs of NPP, let them go. Just let them grow. More drugs does not speed up the rate at which they grow muscle. Sometimes you hit that, and I'm sure you've had preps like this too. It feels like you're doing nothing and everything's just working. Yeah. Don't change anything then. Just run with it for as long as you can. And then that would be how we would gauge that process. Now, 20 weeks, and then usually I like to take a break. And that's also from an exposure time when it comes to PEDs too. So I don't really like to have to run PEDs for a lot longer than that. When I say running PEDs, I mean like a full-fledged cycle. Obviously, most of the guys at this point now are just, coming down to TRT, spending some time at like a little baseline level where they're cruising, and then we come back up. Now, and the food is difficult to be able to say exactly what it would be because it's going to be based on that athlete's metabolic function and how they grow and what's considered a caloric surplus for them. Because some guys, 5,000 calories is barely a surplus.
Yeah. Let's focus on a composition. Let's leave it like that, just because I just want to know how lean or how fat you like to keep your guys
it's all based off of how
at
it works.
maximal. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all based on how it
let's
works.
says like visible abs and visible kind of separation on the quads are
A little
good
bit. Yep.
ending of
Yeah.
the UF season like a composition.
Yeah, so that's a good indicator. So, and again, it depends because some guys hold all of their fat in their abs, but then their chest will be striated, they'll have
Yeah.
striated triceps, and the hamstrings will still be in, you know what I mean? But for
Yeah.
rule of thumb, right? Obviously, rule of thumb, we have to kind of speak in generalities. An ab, like definitely some visible abs in the, at the end of the off season. Should definitely have some lines in the legs. I don't need them to be super cut deep, but definitely should have some lines in the legs. Overall composition should, especially if we're dealing with like a really high level amateur or a pro, you should look everyone should be able to tell, oh, that guy's like a professional bodybuilder.
Yeah.
You should easily be able to tell. There should be some separation in the upper arm where the arms meet the delt. It shouldn't just be one smooth piece of muscle. That's kind of my gauge of composition. Now, I think I'll use some coaches as examples, guys that I look up to. I think Patrick Tour is like absolutely crushing it right now. And he keeps his guys lean. And they grow like crazy. But I've never really seen anybody that Patrick's posted or advertised that hasn't been pretty darn lean in their offseason. And that's exactly my point and the argument that I make, where it's like, well, I think if you can keep a composition in a good spot, you don't have to just eat as much food as you can physically stomach all the time. It's not about just force feeding. You give your body just enough food that it can properly absorb into a surplus, and it's going to grow tissue. Because remember, and this, it's not about how much you eat, it's about how much you absorb. Yeah. And we all know this, and right, where gut health has been way more commonly spoken about in the last 10 years than it definitely was in years prior, which is great. That's the evolution of bodybuilding. But I think a lot of guys do give themselves, like you mentioned, stomach issues from a control standpoint and how it looks, as well as digestion issues by overdoing food in their off season. They just are force feeding, thinking that that's what they need to do. I also think that a lot of people think that if they're hungry in the off season, that they should just keep eating. It's good to be hungry. That's a good thing. You should be hungry. There should be some hunger signaling. If you're never hungry in your off season, then it's like, okay, well, why don't we just diet down a little bit? Let's do a mini diet. Let's do that. Let's get it. You can call them a resensitization period if you want to, like, to use some fancy term. It's like, but we gain insulin sensitivity. We regain some hunger. I love hunger signaling. I try to keep my athletes hungry in the off season. It's hard to eat 500 grams of rice in a meal when you're not hungry, especially for those big guys, but the composition is important. And I do think that we lose the sight of that sometimes. Now, in my opinion, the best bodybuilders in the world don't lose sight of that. They stay in good shape year round. I'll use the examples that we all are aware of. Samson stays in good shape year round. Derek
Yes.
stays in good shape year round. Now they're competing a lot too. So again, they never really get
Yeah.
fat. Nick Walker stays in good shape year round. Tony O'Burton, my athlete, stays in good shape year round. Even when I'm feeding him as much as he can handle, stays in good shape year round. And Mike Condell, another one of my athletes, stays in good shape year round. Justin Shire, who's a newer athlete of mine, he's definitely going to be forced to stay in much better shape moving forward in his career because in previous off seasons he's definitely gotten too fat, and I think
Yeah.
that's hurt his ability to grow muscle, and it makes his preps harder now. So and again, all of that stuff matters, right? Like, because this isn't just about growing muscle; it's about putting on a quality amount of muscle to then show it on stage the next time, right? We're trying to jump a weight class in this scenario, correct? So
Definitely.
I think that that's the way that you do that. I think that you try and stay a little bit on the tighter side. Some people, again, can get away with pushing composition way out in the off season because they're really metabolically gifted. You know, they throw a
Yeah.
little bit of cardio in, they do a small deficit, and all of a sudden their body just drops weight, and that's no problem. So it is situational based off of the athlete. But if you don't have to get super fat to put on muscle, why would you? So that's kind of my.
Definitely. I think
But
at this point, yeah.
there's one more thing I wanted to mention. I do believe that at some point, weight moves weight. So you want to get really strong and be a progressive overload type of trainer. At some point or another, yes, we do need to let your body weight drive up. And I think that also, and a lot of guys have talked about it. I know Foad used to talk about this a lot too. When you drive your weight up and you maybe hit like a new PR in the offseason, like a new heaviest weight, you need to settle and you need to let that weight kind of marinate for a bit. It needs to stick a little bit. You need to hold that for maybe a couple of months as opposed to hitting it and then immediately starting to diet right back down. Because it's like, well, yeah, you're going to drop 10 pounds like that. And it's like, well, what was that for? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I personally think that the longer you can let that your weight, your body weight sit at a higher level while still maintaining good composition is how that muscle, that new muscle will stick because in a hard deficit, the new muscle is the first to get dieted off if you potentially take off any tissue.
Yeah. I just wanted to add that at this point of time, I think that most of the coaches realize that the worst that can happen is accumulation of the inflammation in your body, just because this is the most important factor of losing your metabolic adaptations and metabolic health. And metabolic health is something that is probably the most important thing right after the good training in when it comes to the building muscle, to be honest. So that's the most important thing. And the higher the body percentages of your fat, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The fatter you are, the more inflamed you are. So this is
Oh
just a
God,
contradictive. Yeah, definitely.
and
So
to add to that too, your blood pressure would be noticeably higher. Inflammation
yeah,
and blood pressure are very linked, not mutually exclusive, but typically they're very linked. And you know as well as I do from a health perspective, right? The healthier your internals are, the better you're going to grow on the outside as well.
definitely.
So, and blood pressure is the silent killer because they're not always signs. So that's a really
That's
great point. Thank you for adding that.
that. To be honest, with the inflammation is a really funny. It's a really funny thing just because not many guys are considering the inflammation like a serious thing, and they are concerned about their lipids, and they're concerned about their liver and stuff like that. But without the inflammation, even a screw of your lipids are not that scary. But
No,
with the inflammation in the scenario, this is the scary scenario.
absolutely.
So
Same with
this is
blood
like
glucose.
the most, yeah, this is like the most important things to get carry of, the inflammation.
Right.
But
Yep.
let's move it a little bit faster, just because we are talking about 40
Okay. Yeah.
minutes
Yeah. I'm
and we
sorry.
are at question number three. So for the next question, we need to assess how do you count your macros? Do you count your macros from every source? So for example, if I take a pasta, for example, do you count protein, carbs, and fats from the pasta, or just treat it like it's just a carb source?
No, I track it from everything. So I will use like, so for example, oats has some fat in it. And so
Definitely.
I do track that towards their total day's worth of fat.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, it digests the same. Whether it's fat from oil or peanut butter or avocado or ghee or anything like that, or even animal fat from protein. Like I track it all as total amount. I
Okay.
don't track. The only one that I don't track is protein. So I won't track I won't track trace proteins from, I don't even know what to give you an example of, but like pasta, right? Or like
Yeah.
rice or oats or anything. Like there's trace proteins and everything. That is something of that's the only one that I don't. I want to get the protein requirements from the complete protein sources. That's the only way that I track that.
Okay. So
Carbohydrates and fats.
let's talk about how much. So because if you are counting your protein only from the direct sources, so for example, the meats, your dairy, your protein shakes and stuff like that, your egg
Mhm.
whites, uh, how much of the how many grams per kilo or per ounce, or I don't know how you guys
Yeah, so we do.
counting it.
So we do. We'll go like a total amount of like grams of protein per pound of lean body mass is technically the way that it's supposed to be. I realize that when it comes to bodybuilding, that like the way that the registered nutritionist might calculate is going to be different. We're going to be a little bit more extreme. We're going to definitely do more. Um, for women, I would say it's usually just
We
sticking with
talk,
men.
we're sticking with me.
Oh, okay, just with you. Okay,
Yeah,
okay, okay.
I am just shooting for the
Okay, no
heavyweight.
problem, no problem, no problem. There's two separate answers. That's why I just wanted to see if
Yeah,
there was
I
just
wait. I just remember to remember you
yeah,
102
200.
kilos. So it's
So
102. Let's count
so
it that.
basically, so just
One-
using a calculator.
Yeah, me
So
too. Me too.
if you're
He's 224.
225 pounds, okay. So
224.
224. If I did anywhere from 224, it would be, I would use somebody at that size. I would definitely be doing 1.5 grams of protein, and I would be using your total body mass because at 224, that's stage weight. So I would be using that as my calculation. So that would be at least 336 grams of protein from a
Okay.
direct protein source. Now, total protein would probably actually be higher. It'd probably be 375, 380 when including some trace proteins from some of the other foods that you would be eating. But I would be doing at least 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight. So that was the simple math, 336. That would be the starting point, and we
Okay.
can go up from there. We can go up from there. I do run protein higher in the off season than I will run protein in prep because it takes,
Uh,
in my opinion, it takes more. I would rather more protein in the off season to make sure that I'm ensuring that I have enough muscle protein synthesis as well as free floating amino acids to build as much tissue as I can physically build. Whereas to maintain muscle, building muscles is dirty business. That's hard. Maintaining muscle is noticeably easier. So
okay.
I would then likely utilize, if I'm like, so when I'm putting you in a deficit and I'm pulling down on some calories, protein would stay the same for a while, but towards the end of a prep, if I need to be able to make a caloric pull, I might pull a little bit of calories from protein because I don't need as much to be able to maintain the tissue that we have.
Okay. Get it. So
And I
what
know
about
that's
the
different than some people. Some people will do it the opposite. They'll go more protein in prep.
Yeah. So what about the rest of the macronutrients? How about the fats and carbs? Just because there are guys who are not believing in added fats, and there are coaches who believe in adding quite a lot of fats. And
Yeah.
what's your school of thought?
So I like added fats in this simple fact of that it can allow, well, there's a lot of benefits to it from not only a health perspective, but also a cognitive ability. Um, and I definitely enjoy using added fats for guys that are maybe struggling to gain weight. If you're trying to move up a weight class and you definitely want to try and put on as much muscle as possible, put on as much weight as possible, composition being obviously, very much in mind,
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to use added fats. Um, it's not abnormal for, an athlete of mine to be eating over 100 grams of fat per day. But that's while still also having their protein and their carbohydrates be quite high already at that point for them to reach that amount of fat, for that to be necessary. I could say that fat in the off season could range from anywhere from 65 grams to 120 grams, depending on the athlete's metabolic function, as well as what our goal is, how they respond to food, etc. Because there's some athletes who respond really well to fats. Their body just like operates well. That's for whatever reason, their body, when it comes to a fuel source, their body wants to utilize fat as fuel. And then for others, it just bogs them down. It makes food sit super heavy in their stomach. They can't, it slows down their digestion and all these things. So for those people, then it would be like, okay, well, they clearly want to use carbohydrates as their primary energy source. So let's just make sure we keep their carbohydrates as high as we can. So
Okay.
it's super individualistic. And I would say a healthy dose of both, or implementing both in the beginning of an off season for an athlete is very wise. And then you observe and adjust. You observe and adjust based off of how they're responding.
Okay. Great. Great. So what about their calorie intake? Because some guys like to do like a caloric cycle during the week, and some
Yep.
coaches are doing the same diet for whole all days, maybe adding like a intra workout and pulling it out on the rest days. Some guys are doing only like a training and non-training days diet. How's your
Yep.
approach?
I definitely stick more with a training and non-training day approach. However, I have seen some pretty good success with athletes at times still utilizing high days. So if I'm having a glaring weakness in a body part, I might have them do a high day the day before training that muscle group,
Okay.
as opposed to the day of. Because I'm a believer of the food that you eat today affects your performance tomorrow. So I would rather do that. Um, I have seen some good success with that. I don't. I only have people use their intra workout, obviously on training days, but I don't use intra workout nutrition. I don't use carbohydrates during the training session.
Oh, that's shocking. That's
Yeah.
first time I've heard that from the coach.
Yeah, not really. I mean, I might use a little bit, maybe a Gatorade, you know what I mean? Something like that, something simple sugars. Um, and the reason why is because the data, the reason this became a thing in bodybuilding is because we took this from endurance athletes who are doing like much longer endurance based workouts, right? Hours and hours and hours. For the most part, our training sessions should be 75 to 90 minutes if you're, staying focused. We're progressive overload, right? Like we're not doing 3 hour workouts. In my opinion, it shouldn't be done that way. So there's plenty of guys in the IFBB that are training for 3 hours. And if you're going to run a high volume training split and you're just in the gym forever, yeah, you have to have something. But that's not how I have my athletes training. So that's not really how I will run their nutrition. I have used intra workout carbohydrates, but maybe a little bit. And it's for me, it's just an easy way to get a little bit more calories in for somebody if we're really
Okay.
having to push the food. But and it's the very first thing I pull out when they're in contest prep.
Okay. So, first, I want to ask you about the difference between the training and non-training days. Do you pull out a
Yeah.
lot of carbs? Do you maybe like
Um,
replace the calories for the fats or
yeah.
something like that?
Super simple. So it'll be the same baseline fats and protein. It would be about a 25% reduction in carbohydrates.
Okay.
So just a
Okay.
very simple, just simple. Sometimes for people who maybe need a little bit, if I'm doing a bigger reduction, maybe a 50% reduction on rest days, that's for insulin sensitivity purposes, keeping composition a little bit tighter, keeping appetite a little bit better. Those same people I will likely be doing the high day diet then on some type of
Okay.
day. And I don't love cheat meals, to be perfectly honest. I let them do it for like mental health purposes, but I don't think that cheat meals are like this secret to building muscle.
Okay, so you stole you already answered the next question, but I wanted to come back
Sorry.
to the intro workout
Okay.
part, just because do you not believe in utilizing insulin protocols, for example, with
I'm not a big
using
insulin. I'm
okay.
not. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'll let you finish your
Yeah,
question.
because I am a firm believer of using GH with insulin and carbohydrate during your training just to make sure that you are utilizing the IGF secretion effect, especially if
Mhm.
you're losing something like Novorapid that have probably
Okay.
the most impact on the IGF with
Okay.
GH. So if you're timing it right in your training and you're utilizing something like carbohydrate intra, adding Milos says, super saturation drinks
Yeah.
with all of the beta alanine, creatine, citrulline, malate, and stuff like that, you can
Right.
actually achieve a pretty good effect, in my opinion, at least. I don't want to talk in your name,
Oh, it's
but
okay.
you can explain yourself.
Yeah. So I'm not a huge insulin user. If I do use insulin, it would be like you mentioned, like a Nova Rapid, or we have access to Humalog over here, so it would be a very fast acting insulin.
Yeah,
Um, if I'm going to use insulin with a pre workout meal, so like a pre workout insulin protocol, there's 100% going to be intra workout carbohydrates.
yeah,
That's just basics. You know what I mean? Like it would be very ill advised to not have something there.
yeah, of course.
I don't use a ton of insulin for my athletes. It's never been a compound that I've personally felt good on. And I don't know how to describe it other than like it just has always made me feel very sluggish. And I have always felt personally like very hypo on it, even when using 3 units of Humalog, very low amounts, right? For 3 units of Humalog with 100 grams of carbohydrates, for example. Um, and I've just noticed that some of my athletes have felt the same way. Now, there have been athletes who have come to me that have a drug history where they've used insulin successfully. And then we just communicate. And then for the most part, we just keep their insulin protocol relatively the same that they've done. I'm definitely a believer in the fact that you can use GEH and insulin together to be able to get that IGF secretion benefit 100%. Like I understand the science and I know that it
Yeah,
works. It just hasn't been the way that I have built my guys. And so
okay.
I've just, and I'm not afraid of it. I'm not opposed to it. I don't know. It's just something. It is a little bit of a risk, because there is a lot of human error that can occur with insulin that can lead to some issues, right? Um,
Yeah,
but for an experienced athlete, like again, speaking to yourself, if you have done so with a lot of success, then we would build. And I'm taking you on as a new client. Well, I'm not going to rewrite the textbook of what has worked well for you, because that's, in my opinion, the way that you and I would work together would be like, I'd be like, okay, tell me the things that you've done that have worked really, really well and that make you feel really good and that have like led to really good performance in the gym. And we would have that conversation. And I'd be like, okay, well, I'm going to put a little twist on it, but we're still going to keep some of those same principles in mind. So, but for the most part, a lot of the athletes that I have never used insulin, and I'm like, okay, no problem. We don't have to add that variable in. We always have it in the background if we need to. I've definitely used it before, and I've used it for some big guys, especially towards the end of an off season. The reason why I'm not crazy about it is because the pancreas can handle, for a non-type 1 diabetic or a non-type 2 diabetic, somebody who has regular, blood sugar levels and regular, pancreas activity. For the most part, until your food gets really, really high, your body can handle the food that you're eating with the insulin that it makes. Now, I do believe that there's times and places where it'd be wise to utilize a little bit of exogenous insulin to take some pressure off of the pancreas, because it's kind of
yeah,
working in overdrive all the time for like an 18-month off season, right?
yeah.
But I'm not crazy about it, which is why I prefer my intra shake to be creatine, EAAs, glycerol, and salt, and maybe some glutamine. If I don't use the glutamine in the intra shake, then it's usually in like their morning digestion drink with then maybe just kind of sprinkled into some type of, just like some type of drink like this, like throughout the day.
Okay. Well, when it comes to me, I'm using insulin to the day of the competition. To be honest,
Oh, do you
even
really?
before the stage, yeah, the whole
Okay.
cutting phase, I'll be using it. Yeah, definitely. I am a
Okay.
firm believer in insulin, and it never has get me any problem, to be honest. But
Mhm.
when it comes to the high days, you utilize sometimes something like a basal insulin, for example, on those days. Like I don't know, like a small
I've
amount,
experimented
10,
with
20,
Lantus.
30, 50. Yeah.
Yeah, I've experimented with Lantus with myself and with a couple of athletes that, wanted to try it or who have had experience with it. Um, I've never noticed any type of like really crazy benefits from it. I have in some off seasons utilized insulin, but it would be a more of a humalog, like a fast acting insulin, on high days with athletes that are in an off season
Yeah.
doing a training day, non training day, and then a high day diet. On their high days, they might do again a little bit of humalog. Typically, the meals that I'm going to use insulin with would be meal one, pre workout, or post workout.
Okay.
Those are the three meals that, quite frankly, for me, make the most sense to really put an insulin in. Any other meal at that point, it wouldn't make a ton of sense because, like we just discussed, like your body can handle the amount of carbohydrates that you're utilizing. And again, I'm a less is more, so it's like it would maybe be 3 units with meal one, maybe 3 units before your pre workout meal, and then maybe 3 units with your post workout meal. But we also want to make sure that the pre-workout and post-workout meal are separated by enough time that the fast-acting, like maybe a Humalog, right, fast-acting insulin, isn't overlapping.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's still active in your system for a couple hours.
You see, I found it funny just because this is the most logical, it has the most logical sense to use it, like you says, yeah, the morning, the before and the after workout, and at the same time, this is the least like the smarter way to use it, just because when you wake up, you're primed for the insulin, like because
Yeah,
you're
because you've been
fasted.
fasting. Yeah.
Then you're right before your training. You're basically handling your glucose just because of the activation of the GLUT4 receptors, and after workout is the same. So basically, this is the three
Yeah,
times that you don't have to use it, but this is the logical to use it. It's like contradictive itself, but this is just how the bodybuilding works, and
that's
let's
right.
put
That's
a
why
science guy
there's
here and tell different.
yeah, and but that's the
Yeah,
beauty of it, right? So like, because no
yeah,
one is right or wrong in their approach, because the way that I
definitely.
just described, the way that I would potentially use it is, and obviously all this is hypothetical, is that would work. That would work extremely well. But then somebody could do something completely different, right? The complete opposite. And
Yeah.
that could still work and still work extremely well. Again, there's the beautiful thing about bodybuilding is there's no rules. So, but that's why you find the formula that works for you as an athlete. Now, that formula is always changing, so you have to maintain, adaptability.
Okay. Let's. I have a question about the biggest mistake that athlete can make in the off season, in your opinion. So, for example, in your years of coaching, what's the most common thing that athletes, even though they are probably very knowledgeable and they are coaches themselves, do still to
Yeah.
this date?
I mean, using a lot of insulin and basal insulin with a really high fat diet in the off season is definitely going to lead to a lot of fat gain, but because we know it's a storage hormone. So if you're eating a ton
Yeah.
of fat and you have basal insulin plus humalog in, then yeah, you're going to get pretty fat. But no, just joking, just joking.
Yeah.
Um, I think the biggest mistake that an athlete could do, and this would never happen for one of mine or or any coach that is on top of their team, but just an athlete who maybe doesn't have a coach. The biggest mistake they could make would be not tracking their performance in the gym and not tracking their food, not paying attention to hydration as well as their sodium intake. Minerals are so important for performance. And then also like really neglecting like their sleep. I mean, like just kind of YOLOing it in the off season, thinking like that if you're eating in a surplus and that you go to the gym and train hard, that like everything's just going to work out. It's like it's still very tracked. It's still very measured. The reason why I think that also can be a huge mistake is that it gives you no baseline for when you start your eventual next contest prep, because now you're
Yeah.
literally just like throwing a dart at a dartboard and hoping that you hit it when you're creating that first plan. So for me, like athletes that and I don't work with those athletes. I'm not a prep only coach. Like if somebody comes to me in prep and wants my help, that's fine, but we it's on the condition that like I make that they have to sign up for a year. because it's like, well, you're going to work with me after the prep so that way I can do your reverse diet and actually do your off season with you too. So so maybe the simple answer to that question would be not hiring a coach for their off season. That's easily the worst thing that you can do because for a fact, man. I mean, maybe
Yeah,
not you, maybe not me, but let's take the average bodybuilder. They're not going to keep themselves accountable the way that they would be accountable if they had a coach that they're paying.
yeah.
So that's a huge, huge mistake, and it's a big red flag.
Definitely. And if you're coaching yourself, there's always a possibility that doing unnecessary stuff, to be honest. Just because I know that myself, just because I am coaching myself right now, but I have a very good relationships with my previous coach, Lucky. And I have a log on a forum, and
Yeah.
sometimes he watches what I do, and I have a message from him, and he says me, dude, what are
Why are
you
you doing
doing?
this?
And I'm
Yeah.
yeah, you're right, man. You're right. So this
Yeah.
is like even though I know that this is not necessarily uh, like an obvious thing to me just because it's me. I'm always thinking that nah, this is not. I'm gonna handle that. I'm gonna handle it just because no one would, but I'm gonna do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you're too close to the situation because you're coaching yourself. That's
yeah,
why the outside view can take that step back, look at the bigger
yeah.
picture, and be able to give you that feedback.
So you always need that second part of ice, definitely. Yeah.
Have to.
Okay. So you covered the cheat meals, but I'm gonna ask it again just because you've been. I am like amazed how many people message me telling me that they are with their coach just because they watch my podcast series,
Oh, okay.
and they
I'm not doing
basically
myself
just
any favors here by what I'm saying, but
all you do. This is the most like important commercial of your service that's gonna be on the internet just because people can watch this and resonate with you.
right,
And
right,
this
right.
is like the perfect like a situation just because sometimes I think about the coach one way, but I
Mhm.
am hire him and it's totally opposite. And this is like you're sticking to the wall and basically you just don't feel this. And if you watch a podcast like this and they are basically knows if I'm gonna ask you, are you
Yep.
allowed your clients for having a cheat meal? Do you like plan the cheat meals, or do you just tell them that they can have cheat meal, but this like on their shoulders? So if they
Yeah, yeah. No, I know
screw
what you're
this
trying to say.
out, yeah,
Yeah. So the it's a two-pronged answer because on high days, like in a contest prep, I usually at the end of a high day on a contest prep, it'll be a cheat meal. Because
okay. But
so I
let's
do
sense that
for
this
off
is the off
season.
season, yeah, off season,
Okay. Okay. I was gonna say more in the prep. That's obviously like a lot more specific. Whereas in the off season, it would be more of like yeah, you can have one weekly cheat meal. Maybe a family meal, maybe a date night, something like that. It's for quality of life. It's for a little bit of balance, and that's it. It has to me, it serves next to no nutritional benefits. It's not for an influx of calories. You're already eating in a huge surplus by that point. It's to taste something good and go out and have a nice time and not worry that you can't eat with your friends and family or whatnot. That's solely what it's for, in my opinion.
yeah,
For an off season cheat meal, I actually think that cheat meals can have some really good benefits for the opposite side when you're in a prep.
yeah,
Uh, but again, for the argument's sake and for the conversation's
yeah,
sake, then I would say, yeah, one a week, it's fine. Really metabolically gifted athletes, two a week,
yeah.
but that's
So
about it.
you see now, if someone's gonna see this, they know that he can hire you,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They might, they
or
might, they might.
or
Yeah.
don't. For example, I was with a Don Super Slice, and he was
Oh, okay.
huge on like something like cheat days, but that was
Yeah.
something that
So
is it's too hard mentally for me, and that was something that's I'm still with a good relationship with Dom. Dom is a great coach, and
Oh, I
nothing,
love Dom. We're very
nothing,
good friends.
nothing bad to say about it. He still texted to me, and sometimes we chat. So he's a great guy, but that was something that's a little bit get me off him, just because it was just too hard for me. I just
Right.
I don't know why, but I just can't cheat. I just
You
can't
needed
cheat.
more structure. You know what I mean? It
Yeah,
was just
definitely, definitely.
Statystyki podpowiadają mi, że duża część osób oglądających ten kanał wciąż go nie subskrybuje. Dlatego jeżeli należysz do tego grona, zasubskrybuj już teraz oraz wpadaj na naszego Discorda. Link znajdziesz w opisie tego filmu. Zapraszam Cię również do wspierania ruchu Zapierdalać Trzeba poprzez zakupywanie merchu oraz szerowanie, udostępnianie i lajkowanie. Wielkie dzięki i wracamy do materiału.
Okay, so let's get back to our conversations.
yeah,
You've talked briefly about the mini cuts before, because you are
yes,
just setting your off season in like a 20 week parts, then like some sort of a mini cut, then the next phase of the off season. So this we have that covered, to be honest. But
okay.
what about the cardio and, I don't know, maybe steps or something like that in the off season?
Yep.
Do you like to utilize it?
Yes, definitely. So I like to keep a basal level of steps, which I just view as activity, and then some actual concentrated cardio, which would be a set amount of time with a set amount of sessions per week in the off season. Not only for body fat levels, it's for overall general health and well being, especially heart health. Um, Even if something is as low as 3 times a week, 15 minutes, I would say, well, let's make that 15 minutes hard. Let's get your heart rate really jacked up, because, quite frankly, that's not only going to help with cardiovascular endurance for the training, but it's going to keep your heart in a healthier spot, right? Like cardiovascular work and cardiovascular exercise, more aerobic exercise versus anaerobic, which would be lifting weights, is very useful. And I have family members that are endurance athletes and whatnot, so we talk about this pretty regularly. But yeah, I'm very very much a believer in that, and I practice it myself every morning. For the most part, for me, every morning I'm going outside, doing a nice walk, and then getting on my bike that's in the garage, and going ahead and doing maybe 15 20 minutes or so. It also, in my opinion, helps, especially for off season athletes, keep their appetite up. And then
Yeah.
fasted cardio can also help with blood sugar control as well.
Definitely. I was about to say that for example, I'm right now on a 20-year use of GH, and
Whoa.
my my blood sugar is my morning blood sugar is on average 75 to 80 milligrams on deciliter. So I'm
That's excellent.
yeah, I'm very healthy metabolically, just because I am doing almost 15,000 steps a day plus cardio on
Oh,
top, plus 4 times a week I'm doing a 6.5 minutes of hit intervals.
okay.
So this is something that I am a firm believer, and I think my blood works, my blood pressure, my sleep, everything is on the top scale. So I have zero problems, and I am a firm believer that this is just because I am really strict with overall health and management, even though I am on a very high amount of GH. So it's
Yeah,
just
but
I don't believe that GH is that much of a devil. It's more like
no.
people are just too fucking lazy, to be honest.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's really it. I mean, the lack of desire to do the cardio and the steps and everything, which you're definitely doing
definitely.
a good bit. You're definitely getting after it with your activity level. But I imagine it's helping your body stay leaner. I imagine it's probably keeping your blood sugar in a better spot, which obviously it is. I'm sure that your hunger levels are good. So there's a ton of reasons to do it. And here's my thoughts: is if it got to the point where, yeah, you were burning so many calories from your cardio and from your activity that you weren't able to be in a caloric surplus, then sure, I could see the argument where I would say, okay, let's pull back then. But for the most part, that's not even close to the case for these people. It's just they just
Yeah,
don't want to do it.
of course, of course. I think this is like a new. I am not working my legs because I'm use bike a lot. kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, no,
Okay.
like that's it's not the same, but
Okay, so let's talk about probably the most important things for all the guys who are listening to this and they are just freaking bodybuilding meatheads. Let's talk about the PEDs in the off season. What
okay.
are the best compounds for building muscle in your opinion in the off season, of course?
Okay. So I'm
Oh,
pretty
that's
go
just we don't have to cover the dosages or anything if you don't want it to.
okay, okay, yeah, that's
Just the compounds and
right. Because
but if you wanted to, we can talk the dosages as well.
I'll be happy to talk about what I'm doing, as opposed to sharing what my athletes might be doing.
Yeah,
Because I also
definitely.
think before we get into that too deep, it's like dosage is so dependent on the person. So
Yeah.
that much I would need to make sure is said right up front. Um, so personally, I like using. I obviously test is best. I'm definitely a believer in using
Yeah,
a
definitely.
baseline of testosterone. I like using not a crazy amount, but enough that I can definitely feel the benefits of having my testosterone levels be higher. I would say on a blood work standpoint, I really enjoy having my test levels be in the 3,500 nanograms per deciliter range. That feels good for me. And then I also think that from an aromatizing standpoint, I can usually control that with another compound. Like I love Masteron. I prefer Masteron over Primo, to be perfectly honest. I also really do enjoy Nandrolone, but I actually personally prefer Deca over NPP, which that might be a little old school for people. Some people might be like, "Man, this guy still uses Deca." I'm like, "Yeah, I do. I feel great on it. It helps my joints feel better." I don't get any like the Nandrolone based side effects that typically come along with Nandrolone when I use Deca. Um, and so I really enjoy that kind of trio right there of running my test up a bit higher, using Mastron with some Deca makes me feel like Superman, and that
Mhm.
is very commonly what some of my athletes will use. But we can also use Primobolan as opposed to the Mastron. Again, they're both derivatives of DHT. I'm not really a trend in the off season guy. Um, I will say that there are times and places, especially if you've been off the stage for a while, you haven't used it in a while, like more than 6 months without using any. I could see a benefit to maybe using a small amount, and a small amount would be like 150 milligrams per week. I would, something small, just for performance standpoints and a little added aggression from it. It does some nice things to composition as well when you're kind of
Yeah.
deep into an off season as well. Um, if I'm going to use an oral in the off season, which I'm not usually crazy about because for the most time, uh, even the mild ones will tend to lead to a little bit of lack of appetite. Just simply putting another thing into your stomach that your body has to break down and digest can sometimes inhibit the stomach, inhibit the appetite. But like Anavar, as long as it's like a really high quality, like legitimate, real Anavar source, in the off season would be kind of like my preferred oral if I'm going to use an oral in the off
Okay.
season. I'm not crazy on EQ. I feel like it screws up a lot of people's blood work. A lot of people get very lethargic on it. But I've also seen people who love it. I've also randomly heard people say that it makes them super hungry, which is kind of random. But it's like, okay, if that's what you get from it, then like, again, this is why it's very individualistic, right? Um,
Yeah.
but those would be the compounds that I would typically, usually ask people to keep on hand and keep ready. If somebody doesn't prefer DECA or if they have issues with it, then NPP for them would be totally fine, right? At the end of the day, it's still Nandrolone.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the way that I would gauge it. Now, I love growth hormone. My rule of thumb with growth hormone is to usually take about as much as you can afford, because it works really well. I don't think that you gain a lot of muscle from growth hormone at anything under 6 IU's.
Yeah.
So, if somebody's using it for the first time, they don't maybe have a ton of money or whatever the case may be, and they put in 2 IU's, 3 IU's, 4 IU's for a man, especially a guy, a 224-pound heavyweight bodybuilder trying to move up to the super heavies. I don't think that the growth hormone is going to stimulate a lot of, new tissue growth. or new cell growth, technically, is what it actually would cause,
Yeah.
until you're into the higher dosages. That's my belief. If you can afford 8 to 10 IUs of legitimate pharmaceutical grade growth hormone, you can really change a physique in a matter of 12 months, with consistency doing that. That would be, again, and like we've talked about, we've talked a lot about insulin already. So, that's
Yeah, yeah,
not my first compound to go to. I know that's not technically an androgen, but it's, it's still a PED at the end of the day.
yeah.
That wouldn't be my first that I would go to, but again, it's in the background if somebody needs it. Now for myself, I'll use some dosages for myself. I'll talk about that. That's fine. I'll run tests anywhere between 750 to 1,000 milligrams a week. I will run Mastron usually at anywhere from 400 to 600 milligrams a week. And then I have usually stuck around 600 milligrams of DECA, but I've run my DECA up as high as 900, and I felt great. I didn't have any issues with that. I was doing a cc of Sustanon, 250 milligrams, with a cc of DECA and a cc of Mastron. So 3 cc's 3 times a week. So that came out to 750 test, 600 milligrams of mass, and 900 milligrams of DECA. That was probably the highest dosed cycle that I've actually ever done. And I definitely enjoyed it. I felt good on it. I was very, very
Yeah.
strong. I definitely put on some quality tissue. I did that for about 16 weeks before I got tired of pinning myself. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take a break. Because I think a lot of people also don't factor that in. I don't know about you, but that's obviously the worst part for some of us, especially myself. I may have a major phobia for that. So like, I don't really
Yeah.
enjoy doing that at all, but it's a necessary evil. But that would be with that cycle, I did 9 IUs of Serostim a day.
Okay.
So the United States pharmaceutical grade growth
Yeah,
hormone is
of course,
Serostim.
of course.
Yep. And so that, one vial is 18 units. So I went through a vial every other day.
Okay.
So that
Okay.
was the most
Yeah.
aggressive that I've done for myself. And again, it feels good. Some people are going to hear that and be like, that's it.
Yeah, man. I am really discussed sometimes with people who are basically just lying because, like, everything around 1.5 to 3 grams of gear is just a normal dose for someone who's heavy and super heavy. Because
Absolutely.
this is how it looks. So obviously, some need more, some need less, but this range is just the typical dose. So and like you said, like 8 to 15 IUs of GH is nothing crazy for me. It's just like a normal thing to do, and I don't know why people are lying. I don't know why people are afraid of talking about that. I get it that someone might copy that or something like that, but we
Yeah.
all are grown men and we all have our brain and we either use it or not. So you're basically decided what you are gonna to do in your life. So
Yeah.
for me, this is the same as using any of the other thing that we use. So BCAAs, EAAs, dextrose,
Yeah.
stuff like that. This is just something that's improving our performance, and we deal with the consequences just because we are knowledgeable enough to know that this is not a healthy thing. And but nothing in the sport is
Right.
because sport
Yeah.
itself is not a healthy thing. So
No,
yeah,
it's an extreme sport, and I'll say this, like I use myself as a guinea pig. I think a lot of coaches have probably would argue the same thing, that they kind of are their own guinea pig. So I will, like, I wouldn't ever prescribe a cycle that's more aggressive than the one that I just described that I've done. And my blood work came back just fine at the end of that cycle. And again, it's just, if you do the right things while you're on cycle, you
yeah,
need on cycle support with, organ support supplements and everything. Um,
definitely.
I agree with you. I don't really know. I don't really understand the idea of lying, and top level pros that are saying that they are taking under a gram of total, like their total cycle is under a
Yeah.
1,000 milligrams, and they're just putting on muscle hand over fist. I'm like, okay, man, like whatever you want, whatever helps you sleep at night, but like we all know you're
Yeah,
lying.
definitely.
And
Definitely.
it is what it is. But I believe in the transparency, and I don't actually, like, I don't also really believe that if I if I took more, that it would have
Yeah.
sped up my rate of progress. I think quite frankly, I think I would have gotten to a toxicity point in my body a lot faster. And I would have felt, I cut the cycle at the end at 16 weeks because I could tell my body was ready for a
Yeah.
break. That's 9 cc's of oil that you're taking a week. Like there's only so much that, the body can handle. Some people can handle more than others, but you're kind of beating yourself up a little bit by the end of that cycle. And it's like, I think I would have tapped out sooner had I run higher dosages. And I don't believe that causes more muscle gain. I think it would have,
Definitely.
I think it would have lit up my blood work like a Christmas tree, and I would have felt like crap. And then I have to take time off of the drugs, which then ultimately slows down my rate of progression anyway. So
Yeah.
there's a perfect medium for every athlete, and you just have to find it.
I believe that people just afraid of talking about a gear just because they are thinking that people gonna think that they are not working hard enough, but they are just using a gear. But we both know, and everyone who's in this industry for a long time knows that PEDs is just not that important. It is important to reach the like superhuman level of the muscle, just because
Yeah,
you just simply cannot build that much of a muscle naturally. But to be honest, there's nothing magical in the PEDs. It's all about your work ethic, your diet, your training, your cardio, your sleeping, your hydration, and everything else. Justin
yeah,
Harris says something like, "Doesn't matter what you pee, as long as the amount of the milligrams are suitable for you." Over the week, and this is like
yeah, yeah.
the
I mean,
perfect example of that. People are just crazy about the different compounds, exotic ones like DHB and stuff like that, but no one
yeah,
uses it. No one uses this shitty shit that tests like some sort of DHB derivative or EQ or nandrolone in any
yeah.
like
We don't need to be
esters
reinventing,
combined to it. Yeah,
making new drugs and stuff like that. And yes, I do now. I will say for there, there are some interesting peptides that are out there right now, and that
yeah, of
stuff is
course.
quite interesting. But most of those are metabolic things, and they are useful for dieting.
Yeah,
But like for putting on like slabs of tissue, like yeah, we have our tried and trues, when it comes to this stuff, and like the drugs haven't really changed much in the last 20, 30 years as far as what's available.
same
Um,
shit.
it's the same shit. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that, and that's the way it should stay. Like we don't trust me when I say this to anyone listening. We don't need new drugs. Like we don't.
Yeah,
You just need to make sure that it's quality. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? As long as what you're taking is actually what's on the label of that bottle, and it's
yeah,
from a good source, they make it well, and it's clean and pure, then you're good.
definitely. Don't fix it if it ain't broken.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. So the last three questions are gonna be about how you keep your estrogen with your guys in the off season, because there are some people that believes that if you have a super physiological amount of testosterone, you should have super physiological amount of estrogen. Just I don't know why, but they
No,
are they there are those guys.
yeah. So first and foremost, a lot of it is also going to be about how the athlete feels.
Yeah.
So, are they having estrogen based side effects? Is their libido crushed? Are they unable to? Are they having impotence issues, like unable to get an erection? Are they having acne? Are they very depressed and just like over or very emotional or whatever the case may be? Well, if that's the case, then it's like, okay, well, let's run labs and see where your estrogen levels are that are correlating to those feelings and those side effects. And then we likely need to bring that down a little bit. Now, so it's not really a one size fit all answer, but I'd say a rule of thumb would be 35 to 65, on blood work. That would be where I would say the estradiol would actually land pretty well. I don't use a lot of AIs in the off season with my athletes, kind of very minimally, because I do believe in estrogen, and I do believe in estrogen does two very good things for us as far as regulation, right? It is an essential hormone for muscle growth, and it is still an essential hormone for fat loss. So you can't tank it and expect to be able to do either of those two things. You want to keep it into a healthy range. Now, there's definitely times, like more in a contest prep, when it's time to really crush the AIs. But in the off season, in my opinion, that's the time to use as minimal AI usage as you can. But you can also use there's PEDs that can be used to help with this, right? Like primobolan on paper, primobolan is supposed to be able to lower estradiol a certain percentage point, and masteron is supposed to be able to lower it even a slightly higher percentage point. I've even heard that EQ can potentially do some of the same things. So really, it's kind of about finding the level of testosterone that correlates to the right amount of aromatization for the athlete that gets not only their test levels to where we want it on their blood work, but also allows them to keep their estrogen in a healthy place. Now, it's totally fine and acceptable to utilize some AIs in the off season, some. But if you're taking 0.5 milligram a day of Arimidex in the off season, then it's like, dude, just lower the drugs then a little bit. You know what I mean? Because I personally, like, from a health perspective, right? So like, if we tie this into health, well, prolonged high usage of AIs is actually quite unhealthy. It's probably more unhealthy than just running high androgens, especially for the heart. So that to me would make very, very limited and very minimal sense to do something like that. So
definitely.
I think kind of the rule of thumb is to let your estrogen run, in a level as far as like how elevated it is, until you start seeing, any noticeable side effects, gynecomastia and stuff like that too. If you feel good at 60, okay, then you feel good at 60. That's your body. If some guys like feel awful at 40, then maybe they need to be lower. It's all very independent, but that range of maybe 30 to 60 is usually a decent sweet spot for some people, usually not a ton of issues. When you start seeing estrogen creep up close to 100 is when they're obviously going to be having problems.
Yeah, I believe so as well. Estrogen is like a cardioprotective as well as
Very productive.
but to be honest, the I am not so worried about use of an AI, but more about lowering your estradiol too much, just because this is like the main issue of lowering your HDL and hiring your LDL
Yes,
levels. So
absolutely.
this is yeah. So the last question is about the managing the blood pressure. Do you use some sort of, I don't know, like a telmisartan or something like that, or you like to utilize more cardio, or maybe I don't know, like garlic extracts, stuff like that, that
So
helps with
we do
managing
all of it. So I'm affiliated with Revive Supplements, Revive MD. We have, our blood pressure formula that is usually included in my required health subs list. So the way that I do my programs is like I have a required list of subs that they have to be using year round from almost like an insurance policy from a preventative standpoint. And that way,
definitely.
and usually, and on their check-in form, the blood pressure is a calculated marker. I prefer them to just check it every morning, and upon waking, before stimulants and whatnot, just to be able to have a baseline level of what their blood pressure readings are. I love telmisartan. I think it does way more than just controlling blood pressure. I think it's a great drug. Very accessible on your favorite online pharmacy. So it's and does a really good job of being able to help keep blood pressure in a good spot. But it is very important, and I think that, like I said earlier, it is the silent killer. So it's
Yeah.
linked very commonly to inflammation, and so blood. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that silent killer is blood pressure, not telmisartan.
Say that again.
Yeah, I wanted to uh, correct you just because you says that telmisartan is the silent killer, but you obviously mean that blood pressure is the silent killer, not telmisartan.
Oh, did I say tell me? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, that Freudian slip. Yes. So blood pressure is the silent killer, not not the drug that we're using telmisartan to fix the blood pressure. I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting me. But yeah, so so blood pressure is it's like again a silent killer. it can cause a lot of issues. Definitely is something that we want to keep in a good place. And this is also a big reason why I think keeping composition in your off season in a good place, it's all
Yeah.
tied together. Health is in a better spot. You feel better. You sleep better. You recover better. Your appetite's likely better, and you grow better. It's like, well, if all of these things are better, then why wouldn't we want to do those things?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
it's all linked like this. And it's just such a great like final question because it really encompasses everything because we can all link it back together. So nicely done with that. But I do definitely utilize cardio, keeping dietary things in check because again, there might be certain foods that cause inflammation for the athletes as well, right? So there's, I don't necessarily believe in the whole food sensitivity things, but it could just be how their body reacts to a certain food. Keeping them a little bit leaner, utilizing over-the-counter supplements as well as an RX prescription drug like telmisartan. All of these things combined to keep blood pressure in a good spot because we know that anabolics and androgens will absolutely drive blood pressure up. That's a guarantee, and so it needs to be kept in check. So those are the very simple ways to be able to do it, but you have to be mindful of it.
Yeah. I'm gonna pretend that I managed the whole list just
You
to
did it
make
just
this
you did it
last question
perfectly.
in a perfect spot. So I'm gonna
You
pretend
did.
that. Yeah, it's
That was
perfect.
all you.
Uh, okay, Justin, I think that we covered basically the whole off-season, at least the most important question about the off-season. So I think that we're gonna cut here and we're gonna
Okay.
talk next time about the contest prep, just because we are talking almost over 2 hours, I believe.
Yeah.
And this is a long one, but it's a great one. So I really appreciate that you take your time and you just pretty much explain how you are working with everyone who maybe wanna to hire you as a coach and just just move himself to another heavier division. So for
Yeah.
example, being a heavyweight, because this is like a goal of yours as well, I believe.
I'm a 212 guy. So I
Still?
would like to, yeah, yeah. I'll never
Okay.
grow out of the 212. No, I was only 190 pounds on stage at my pro debut. So
Oh,
in the US we have our weight classes are named as opposed to just numbered. So I went pro in 2021 as a middleweight. So my cap that I could weigh in at was 176 pounds. So I was probably 178, 179 after carb up at my pro
oh,
card win. Then I was 190 pounds at my pro debut. And I've unfortunately had obviously a string of injuries. I had a bicep
yeah.
tear and then I had knee surgery. So that has slowed down my progress. But my goal is to be in the upper 190s the next time that I compete.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
so that'd be just shy of 10 pounds. But I'd like to be I'm always very conditioned, but I'd like to be even more conditioned in
Yeah.
the upper 80s. Because in the 212, and I coach a lot of the 212, and obviously I'm a huge fan of it. It's the division that I grew up watching, and Flex Lewis was the
Yeah, me
first bodybuilder
too.
that I really kind of fanboyed over. Um, Not a lot of those guys are weighing in at 212. They're all different shapes and sizes. It's all about how you display it on that stage.
Yeah,
So
Sean Clarida.
yeah, he's a great example. I mean, even Keon. I mean, last year he was, in the
Yeah.
low 200s. I want to say he was like 202, 203. So it's not about just filling out the weight cap. It's about building the physique up the right way. So, and again, I'm 31, so I'd like to be able to do this until I'm maybe 35, 36, and then see how I feel about it at that point. So, but yeah, for me, and I'm only 5'5", so I'm not like a super tall
Oh,
guy.
okay.
So for me, I would never, I'll never be a heavyweight or super heavyweight, or I'll never be an open
Oh,
guy or anything like that. But that's totally fine. I love coaching them, but it also is a really big
oh,
eye opener to something that I'll never look like. I'll
okay.
never look like those
Because
guys.
the best thing is that I've watched your previous podcast when you are talking about that, and I don't know why I understand that you are wanted to be a super heavy, just because I am 5'7",
No.
and I wanted to be super heavy. So this is why
Yeah,
I don't know why I linked it up like that, but maybe it's even better just because 212 is a great division, and I love it, and I am really sad that is slowly disappearing, especially from the Olympia stage. They are pushing it back to the different day and a different stage and stuff like that. And it's really a shame, to be honest, just because
yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
It's kind of heartbreaking a little bit to because it'll
Yeah, it is.
it'll probably be the men's division that we eventually lose. It'll be
Yeah.
open, classic, and men's physique, which is tough because we have a lot of open guys that started in the 212 and use that as their way to
Yeah.
graduate into the open. I mean, we've had a lot of guys. Keon's going to eventually do it. I think the Ukrainian kid, Nihat, is going to end up doing it.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
there's a lot of good 212 guys that I think are eventually going to make that jump to the open. Um, which it's like the argument is, well, where do they compete without the 212? Are they just a small open guy for years getting third call outs until they have enough muscle? It's kind of like it stinks, you know what I mean? It didn't used to be this way. It was a very highly sought after division that a lot of people enjoyed, and we don't have that many opportunities with shows. There's very few shows in the U.S. There's actually more shows outside of the U.S. for 212
Yeah.
than there are in the U.S. And you could say the same thing about actually open bodybuilding. There's more shows outside of the U.S. for open bodybuilders than there are in the U.S. Because we're losing some. Like Chicago Pro doesn't have open anymore this year.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it is a little heartbreaking, but I'm grateful that I'm still in the sport where we do have it, and my hope is to be able to be a torch carrier for the division to keep it around as much as I can. And I sponsor, along with the other Camp Janssen coaches, we sponsored the 212 division to be put back in the Chicago Pro last year in 2024. They took it out, and we put up the prize money to bring it back. Um, and so that was something we did last year to try and show support for the division. And if I can use any of my resources to raise money for shows to put the 212 in their show, then by all means, I would absolutely do that.
Yeah.
And I will put my money where my mouth is. I will chip in some of my own personal money for that too, because I love the division. I love bodybuilding. It's bodybuilding's given me everything that I have. This house that I'm sitting in, the car that I drive, the food that's in my refrigerator, all of that is purchased with money that's been earned from bodybuilding. Coaching, of course, that's what I do for a
Yeah.
living, but still, I wouldn't be a bodybuilding coach if I wasn't a bodybuilder first. So,
Definitely.
it saved my life at one point, and I owe a lot to it, so I'm willing to give a lot back to it. And so, for those watching, like, I'm sure they're wondering, why am I so passionate about it? And it's like, well, that's the reason. So
Yeah, I wish you to reach your goals, and I can't wait to see your pic on Instagram, you carrying your Olympia jacket.
someday, man, that is
I
my
know
dream.
that is a goal of yours.
Yes, yeah, just once,
Yeah,
just to get on
yeah,
that stage one time, to be able to compete with my athletes that are at the Olympia that year. If I, even if I only do it once, if I never do it, obviously it's not a guarantee, but I do think I can get there one time, and if I choose wisely, then that is my ultimate dream, my ultimate goal, and then I can retire a very happy and accomplished
yeah.
bodybuilder, and then give more of myself to my athletes, even though I already give every ounce of myself to them. I'll find a way.
Great, great. Thank you, Justin, and for all those guys who are sticking with us to the end of this podcast. All the information about your coaching, your social media, and stuffs that people can find everything about you are gonna be in the description down below. Please subscribe. Please share this because this is like very tough for me to reach the outside of Europe people just because
Yep.
I have like a Polish language channel, and if you're speaking English on a Polish language channel, YouTube just cut off your views. So that's tough one. I probably gonna create an English like a YouTube or something like that to put out
Okay.
the content maybe there just to reach a little wider audience outside of the Europe. But for now, we have to deal with that, and
Yeah.
this is why I counting on you guys to share the good knowledge. And I thank you once again, Justin, and that's all for today. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.